okay, now we need to push that along. And so as a council member, I know how to listen, I know how to take action, and I know how to work with the community to make change happen. The last thing I'll just say before I leave today is that my mother was an open space advocate. She wrote the proposition for a supervisor in San Francisco to protect open space in Chinatown, where there's tall buildings that grow too high, they shadow public spaces. And my grandmother, who's actually now in hospice, unfortunately went out the way she would have went out, which was gardening in her front yard. And so I want to honor her legacy and my mother's legacy and follow in those footsteps to make sure that we have green buildings, we have rooftop gardens, we have the kind of environment that makes Sunnyvale a livable city and one that we can be proud of. So thank you so much, and I'll stay afterwards, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Now we have Henry Alexander on video.
I really wish I could have been there at the SUFA candidate forum. Unfortunately, I'm actually on a plane right now as you're watching this. But I will be in Sunnyvale soon, and I appreciate your time. So the first question is, what has been your interest in the past in the urban forest or in the environment, and have you been involved? Yes, I definitely have been involved. I was appointed as a Sunnyvale Parks and Recreation Commissioner. For the last 6 years, I've served in that capacity, 3 of those years as the chair, 2 of those years as vice chair. I've also led an Adopt a Park initiative within the Rainier and Birdland neighborhoods where we successfully planted trees, cleaned up the playground, and improved Rainier Park. So I have a very strong and deep-rooted background in the environment. So for question number 2, what is your program to advance the urban forest in Sunnyvale? What I'd like to do is put a real effort to see a program in which Sunnyvale supports the awareness of environmental focus. So part of that would be to look at marketing Sunnyvale as the city of the sun and put a greater emphasis on solar energy to the Bay Area so that Sunnyvale can be the best example. And I think it can be done for the urban forest as well. And I've seen through various initiatives that I've led that there's a growing community of residents as well as businesses that would like to have a greater impact through improving the quality of life for all. And the last question is, how do you reconcile the rapid development in the city? I believe Sunnyvale wants to have a real impact on the environment, and there has been, fortunately, a consistent effort by the city council to build more developments in an attempt to try to make the city into a mini metropolis. Now, I think there are some advantages to growth, but I don't think it should be at the expense of the further reduction of trees or forestry within our city. And this has unfortunately been standard for not only the council, but for my opponent as well. And I believe that my background and knowledge of the environment will provide an immediate balance to the current council, which has 4 members who were from the Planning Commission. So I'd like to provide a little bit better balance to the council that has more environmental focus. So again, my name is Henry Alexander. I'm running for seat number 1, City Council of Sunnyvale. My website is henryforsunnyvale.com. Please visit, and I will look forward to seeing you all when I return. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the council members who have made their presentations. Now you have time to ask questions of these candidates, not council members, candidates. We have 2 microphones, I think, so we can kind of circulate them. Yes? Remember, 1 question to 1 candidate. No? Anyone have a question? Yes. Okay.
This question is to Mr. Larsson. Last election cycle, we saw a spend of approximately $150,000 to your benefit. So $150,000 minus whatever your direct contributions were spent on you by 2 PACs. Do we expect to see that extremely gross amount of PAC money spent in this election? you believe?
So it's not clear to me how much that was actually to my benefit. Yes, there was a lot of money spent. However,
sorry, I saw them walking the streets before.
Let me answer the question. So yes, I know they spent a lot of money. I know that they hired people to walk, and I personally actually got complaints about those people walking. So I'm not sure how well they actually represented me. And the way that the laws work, I can't actually reach out and tell them to stop doing it. So I'm not expecting that this time around. I don't think that's what their focus is, in part because this is now an even year election instead of an odd year election, and they're focused elsewhere. This time I'm expecting just to run my own campaign, and I actually prefer that as a candidate because then I can put out my message instead of other people putting words in my mouth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just an old person, but I worked in a solar energy company in Little Park for 21 years. When I drive around Sunnyvale, I don't see squat for rooftop solar. Is there a hang up there, or not efficiency enough, or it cost too much, or what? And how do trees affect that if you do have solar?
Are you asking one candidate?
I don't know, anybody wants to answer?
You'd like to? Okay.
Well, there is actually a lot of solar that's been installed in the city of Sunnyvale. We have LEED standards that we go ahead and go to, and the way LEED is defined right now, it doesn't say do solar. It says, gives you a variety of things to go ahead and do. We have green standards for the housing building, so it's going there. Trees actually can have a negative impact on the ability of solar, because if you've got a lot of trees that are overhanging where the solar goes. So as part of development studies, we do studies so that how places are going to be able to have not be impacted by trees, so the solar can go ahead and be there. I would expect to see over the next year or two the standards changing for the definition of what is required for solar. Several of us in the city, I can't claim it myself, is with a name like Sunnyvale, we should be the premier solar city in the entire county or the country or the state. So I think, I can't promise as an individual council member that those policies will change, but I do believe we will be looking at those and seeing if we can go ahead and change the requirements. Builders right now already have to wire their rooftops for solar, but they don't have to put it in. And that's the piece we need to go ahead and take a look at changing.
Anyone else with a question? Andy?
So my question, again, goes back to rooftop solar. I've spoken to the council a few times asking, why can't we require these new office buildings to put in rooftop solar? Not just wire the building, but actually install the panels. San Francisco does this. Sebastopol, Culver City, Santa Monica, and Lancaster all have these requirements for new office buildings. Only one current council member seems to be supportive of this idea. I'm not sure why we're not getting any traction. Like you said, we're supposed to be the city of sun.
City staff is...
Oh, I have to pick somebody.
Since we don't have any questions, you can pick them.
Okay, I guess I'll ask Joshua and Glenn.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point that you made, Eddie. And one of the problems is for example, we had recently a large J. Paul development that was approved. It was beyond, so the way the situation works is the builder gets what's called an entitlement, right? So that entitles them to build. It went through the process, it was appealed, and frankly, most of this stuff doesn't come to the council unless it goes beyond the already kind of generous standards for building. So this one was at a much higher floor area ratio, and it came before the council, and to your point, I suggested a number of people, and Councilmember Goldman actually made, I think he made a motion, which wasn't died for lack of a second, which he says he's going to put on his tombstone. That was a joke. If you've been to many council meetings, you know it's hard for Michael to get a second on a motion. But the point being, why could we not add that? And there's absolutely no reason that as one of the conditions for building, we could have asked J. Paul and the folks that are building that building to have solar on it. And I think there were requirements from the Planning Commission on things like the type of art that needed to be on the facility, which to the council's credit, they took care of. But the idea that we can ask what kind of sculptures they're going to have, but we can't ask that they have solar. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And if I'm on the council, I'm going to fight for solar for all buildings over 10 units.
So Josh has got it almost right. So he's correct. The council should go ahead and look at this. And it's about a matter of changing the policy. When a project comes through and they start a project, there are a defined set of rules that somebody needs to go ahead and build to. If you're doing remodeling to your house, you go ahead and remodel under a certain set of rules, and then when you want to get it approved, do you want somebody to change the rules on you and what you're supposed to do and change the bar for what your requirement is? I don't think you do. It's the same thing for developers. And this is why I said, I believe we will be looking at policy level changes so that new projects that go ahead and come through will go ahead and have those requirements, and those requirements will be understood at the beginning. And developers do a very good job of the requirement of what they're told to do. They go ahead and get that stuff done. So that's the way I think it goes ahead and says. I actually know how the process works, and I and nobody else here should say, I'm going to be able to make this happen. It takes multiple votes to go ahead and get that to occur. And that's why I said, I believe we'll be looking at policy changes that will go ahead and change what the requirements are for solar on constructions.
Do you want to answer?
Can I respond real quickly? It's a debate, right? So it's a candidate form. So I just think it's important to know they went because they were above the floor area ratio. So it's not like they were asking for something special. And that's why I think we need to do it. And just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that I can make sure that we have solar panels. Obviously, that's not the case, but it is something to fight for.
That's where Mr. Hendricks or not? Okay, is there another question from the audience? Yes?
Hello everyone, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this question is for both, again, for Josh.
You can ask two.
Okay, Josh and the mayor. Of course, while we're on the note of solar panels, Josh already explained that a clear specific policy change. My question to you is, Mr. Mayor, what specific policy changes do you favor to promote solar energy?
It would be a change to our building policy. The change would be to our building policies that say, instead of just a developer being required to put solar or the hardware, the wiring for solar implementations, is that they would be required to implement them. Now, it's more than just saying we need to go ahead and do that. We need to understand how that's going to play into LEED standards and other things like that, because we're trying to get builders to go to platinum for their LEED standards, which has other types of environmental savings for energy usage and how it consumes energy and other things like that. So it's not just a simple matter of saying do it, but that would be the policy change, is to state here that not only wire for solar panels, but actually to go ahead and install them. We need to take a look at that for new residential building. It's much more difficult to take a look at that for remodel of residential buildings. Like I'm taking a look at putting solar on my house. First thing I have to do is I have to upgrade my electrical panel. There are multiple other things I have to do when you're talking about upgrades at old homes.
I think I pretty much answered this previously. So yeah, I'm just going to fight for anything over any development with over 10 units. I think we definitely need to have solar.
I'm wondering if the other candidates could share on this same issue.
Right. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Do you want to start yourself?
Sure, thank you. So some additional thoughts. In talking with, so I have a friend who does solar installation professionally, and also in talking with an advocate who had really worked to help promote Silicon Valley clean energy when we were setting that up. And they were pointing out that with Silicon Valley clean energy, we're already getting clean energy in Sunnyvale. And that if your goal is really to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which I think that really is the primary goal, actually, before you consider solar, the first thing to do is to look at reducing your energy use. And so that can be improving the insulation and and this is in your home, putting in double paned windows. There are a lot of energy efficiency improvements you can do that are actually more cost effective, they cost less, and save more on greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the first thing to look at. The other thing is that actually utility scale solar is also much more cost effective than putting solar on your rooftop. And so for the same amount of money that you could spend on putting solar on your rooftop, you could actually get an even greater benefit in terms of greenhouse gas reduction if there was a way to invest in these utility scale solar farms. So I think that would also be something for us to look at, but really to keep the focus on what will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions the most. That should be the first priority, and then from there we can figure out which options are the best options to pursue.
John Cordes, favorite subject of mine, solar. I put solar on my house in 2009, so it's about paid off by now. I think it's, what's happening now is in California that it's going to be required for new residential construction starting in 2020, but not required for commercial until 2030. So along with what Andy said, cities can require it earlier, and particularly for large buildings, the economies of scale question that Gustav brought up makes a lot more sense, right? If you're covering a 400,000 square foot building, you get economies of scale when you put solar on it that you don't get on an individual house. And also we need to move, even though we have 100% carbon-free electricity now, we have to keep increasing the percentage of it that's renewable instead of just carbon-free, right? Right now we're getting a lot of electricity carbon-free in Sunnyvale from hydro. So I'm very much in favor of requiring that they install the new solar much faster than the state standard of 2030 for large commercial construction, and it's going to obviously go in 2020 for residential construction. I also think we need to be working with Silicon Valley Clean Energy to do a lot more community-based solar projects. They're trying to figure that out now, right? How do we put solar on every parking lot? How do we put solar, every strip mall that we have where the community puts in the funds and gets the benefits, right? It isn't up to the property owner to do that. So it's going to be an exciting time going forward with solar, and I'm definitely a fan of trying to increase the amount of solar we have in California.
Yeah, I think definitely going off with all the comments, one thing I mentioned during my speech was the green business program. So looking at other cities and seeing what programs they have that Sunnyvale could also implement but make better, because we wouldn't be the guinea pigs, we would be able to look at the programs, what are the problems, and then solve those loopholes. So a green business program, looking at a business improvement district, maybe having a component of that for street trees, for maintenance, for solar installation. My brother works for Solar City, now Tesla. He's been working there as project manager for about 4 or 5 years, and he's actually told me of how it works. My mother's an architect and a urban planner. I also have a degree in planning. And so looking at those incentives for home conversion also, the city of Seattle had a public-private partnership where there was a grants-based system where residents could apply to a certain amount of that grant to be able to get subsidized funds, or not subsidized funds, but to subsidize the cost of conversion to other residential homes. And so looking to our business partners also to see what community benefits they want to play a role in to make sure that we can do that. So again, as I said in my speech, is looking at the policy from one end, but also looking at what can actually be done, and working with SUFA and Leonard and the city staff and the city manager to be able to say, okay, how can I as a council member develop the political clout to make this an actual feasible thing, whether it's something that's voted on eventually, or if that's a charter amendment to, as Leonard mentioned, the general plan describing the purpose of street trees in the first place, things like that. Really using policy and intuition that I've developed working with Congressman Mike Honda, Congressman Rokana, and a council member to be able to actually make change happen.
Okay, thank you. And Holly has a question.
So in regards to the solar question, I think it's great to now be looking at the standards and changing the standards to include solar power, not just solar ready. But isn't it true that over the past 5 years, we've put in major office developments like Moffett 1, Moffett 2, Land Bank, most at Peary Park, so it hasn't the train already left the station, and it would appear that the time to have done that would have been 5 years ago before we approved all this development. But let's get back to the subject of trees. At the Butcher's Corner development, the Heritage Commission recommended saving some additional heritage trees. And isn't it true, Gustav Larsson and Mayor Hendricks, that you didn't take their recommendation, and I'd like to know why you didn't take their recommendation to save those trees, because this is SUFA, this is about trees, and you decided not to have that developer save those additional trees. Instead, you voted for a development that allowed the developer to put the buildings closer together. You had that choice at that time, and I'm just wondering if you can explain that choice. Thank you.
So, there we go. Okay, is it on? There we go. Okay, now it's on. Yeah, so I'd have to go back and look at that specific detail. My recollection was that we actually saved some of those trees, but I could be wrong. And so I'll have to go back and look at that. Yeah,
I can help you with your recollection if you don't recall.
well, I'd like to go back and look at the staff report, because in terms of why I might have not have gone with that recommendation, I think in general, I'd say the city annexed that property actually so that we would have control over the development of it. That if it remained county property, then it would be up to the county to decide what would go in there. The project was generally in line with what had been anticipated in the El Camino plan. And I think that it was better to do that than if the county had retained control over it, then we really would have had no say on what happened to that project.
We didn't ask you about annexing, I asked you why you didn't save those additional.
Yeah, and like I said, I'd have to go back and look at those details.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is that we saved the big oak tree in the middle of what was on that particular property right there. If I remember correctly, I think what was happening that the status of those trees was brought up at the last minute and was used as a tool to try and stop the whole development project. It was not a topic that was originally brought up as the project started. It was right almost at the final step, and somebody said, here's a heritage tree, don't take those out, and they used that as a tool to try and to stop the project. Similar to what happens sometimes with the EIR process of people trying to use environmental reasons incorrectly to go ahead and stop development. So that's what I think it was.
I could just say something to that too. SUFA at the time had gone to the Heritage Preservation Commission and put in an application to have about 5 oak trees at the corner of Fremont and El Camino saved, and also the large oak tree in the center of the property, which is supposed to be about 300 years old. So that process took place, and it was finally passed that those trees were declared heritage trees and were also saved on that site. Another question, and then I have a question I'd like to ask.
It's going to take me a second to put this thought together. It relates to, quote, the Google tax. So I've spoken with the mayor of Mountain View and what they're looking to do to tax large businesses. And I went and looked at what Sunnyvale does, and there's a cap that's ridiculously low for a company the size of Google, Facebook, even my own Juniper Networks. I think the cap is at 450 employees. So my own company in Sunnyvale went from 8x8 cubes to 6x6 cubes to pack more people in. The mayor of Mountain View tells me they had no idea how tightly packed Googleites are. And as we've now seen Northern Sunnyvale become Google's headquarters number 2, effectively, in order to fund the things that we're talking about here, more parks and everything else, I'd like to pick 2 of you to ask explicitly where you stand in your plans on doing something about the business occupancy tax. I'll go with Mr. Fong, and you have glasses like me, so I'll go with you.
If I wasn't clear, let me know, but I think you get the gist.
So basically, Fong, C3, I don't have glasses, but I'll answer the question anyways.
Honda does.
Yeah, it is. Commercial Hondas. The business license tax, I'm in favor of looking at a cap. It hasn't been updated in almost a decade. As you know, it's at 25,900 employees. Google alone employs over 9,000 employees. And so right now, to my knowledge, the city's only generating about $5 million in revenue from that source, and that could be updated. Right now our economy is booming. We have almost reached the net neutrality on our deficit. We've almost gotten rid of it. Thank you to the council members. Councilmember Melton is also here for helping to get that through. And so that is one source of revenue. But another source of revenue that is maybe not a popular subject, but could be looked at in terms of a study issue is looking at our deferred maintenance and how that could relate to street trees. Because as you know, for getting back to trees, as Polly was mentioning, trees can help save pavement in shadowing and less sun radiation on it to make the cracking. And there's a lot of benefits on water retention, things like that. And so is that a process the city manager is looking at? I don't know. And so I would, as a council member, try to make sure that all these different technologies that we can use can save money on the front end and on the back end and generate more sense of revenue. So being creative with our current policy framework and looking both within to maximize efficiency, but look outside of Sunnyvale to say what are other innovative cities doing and how can I, as a council member, talk to their mayor, maybe go visit on my own dime, fly up there, take a tour, and see what program they're running and how well residents like it. And so there's multiple things we could do to generate more revenue, but on the business license tax, raising the cap from 25,000 and making sure that we accommodate for all the size of businesses within Sunnyvale.
Yeah, so I actually proposed a study issue for next year to take a look at both the rate that we charge per employee and the cap. We've had our business license tax for 50 years, since 1968, but it's been a few years since we last updated it. So I think it's definitely a good time to take a look at it. Now, as it happened, the very day that I proposed that study issue, Seattle backtracked on their business license tax. They put it in place, and then there was Amazon pushed back so hard that the Seattle City Council actually rescinded it. So one of the points I made was that I want to make sure that we have a very thoughtful process, because I'm sure that Seattle did their homework, but apparently they didn't do enough homework. So I want to make sure that we do our homework and consider it from many different perspectives, so that we come up with a decision that really sticks and really is in the best interest of the city. But yeah, I definitely support taking another look at that.
Thank you. I have one question. It has to do with trees, of course. We were talking about the urban forest management plan, and within this plan, they suggested that we go from 18% canopy cover to 20% canopy cover. And that would mean 29,000 new trees in Sunnyvale. Now, we've gone to the mayor and we asked him at the beginning of the year to start a campaign in Sunnyvale for 10,000 trees in the next 10 years. But it was turned down, and then he said, if you want more trees, go to the city manager and ask for $10,000 for the next year for more trees. Put it in the budget. So we did that. We went to the city manager and we asked for $10,000 for more trees. Was also turned down. So I would like to ask the candidates here how they could help us either start a campaign or get some more financing for increasing the number of trees in Sunnyvale and large trees that we want. We want those canopy-covered streets that we see on Murphy and in some other streets in Sunnyvale. So I'll start here.
Yeah, so this is very easy and straightforward. There's a process for the way you go ahead and ask for things. And I found it is much better when residents ask for something than the mayor just going and asking for something. So you did what I asked you to do here. It was, we don't need a separate, I think when you were talking to me, you said, here, let's have a separate funding source and things like that. And I said, I didn't think that was the right thing to do. We have the right budgets and stuff that Leonard and his wonderful team goes in and uses. Let's just put more money into that. And I said, let's start with the city manager. I hadn't heard what the outcome of that was. Good, this is what public communication is about. And I think probably as we go through the budget and where we're able to have our budget meetings and we're asked, are there additional funding things that we want to go ahead and do? I don't believe it would be a challenge or a problem to go ahead when we're in our, I think it's in January, we have our budget review meeting. to just go ahead and communicate to staff that says, here, could we go ahead and put another $10,000 into our existing tree structure right there? And I don't see where that would be a problem. Knowing a little bit about the budget, I think we could make it fit. And that would be the way to go ahead and deal with it. So it's good to hear the circle of what's happening with it, and there is an appropriate time through the process for us to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and put some more tree fund money in that tree fund so we can go ahead and get some more trees planted.
So I think one thing we need, so $10,000 should be an easy fix, but I think we really need to kind of up-level the conversation a little bit and look at how are we going to get, why do we have to go to the city budget to get $10,000? We have some of the most generous development impact fee schedules of anywhere. It's from basically, from the beginning of the process to shovels down, it's about 2 years in Sunnyvale. We have an extreme fast track process. We're extremely developer friendly, and one part of that is to have very low development impact fees. We need to increase those and have something specific to trees. And we can do that. We can raise these fees. This is not, and to the point that the other gentleman mentioned about Google, I've also talked about, we need a progressive. We don't need to just look at it as a study issue. We need to have a progressive tax so the largest corporations like Google and LinkedIn and others paying their fair shares. When we see the buses going down the street, I know everybody's seen those buses, I know I do. That's on public lands, on our streets. And it's fair that they pay their fair share, and it's also fair that the developers pay their fair share to make sure that we can create and hit goals like the one that Deborah has mentioned.
Yes, I agree that we definitely need to look at the budget first, but then also hit the study issue route, also see if there's a commission that would be willing to champion it again, or a commissioner, and I would have those conversations with multiple commissioners and with SUFA to see if there's any relationship there. But really, I think it's having a strategy, because if you have a goal, we have to be able to explain to the everyday resident to get political clout to support that goal. And so if there's 30 people from SUFA writing to the city manager, that's a great impact. But if there's 500 people writing to the city manager, that's a bigger impact, right? And so one thing I was talking with Deborah today is that we need to make our neighborhood association stronger. Because if we can get our neighborhood association stronger, we can get organizations like SUFA to present to them, to say these are the resources that the city already offers to help you plant a tree. And if you want to, it's this easy, A to Z. And so that's another route, is communication. How are we actually communicating our city services, especially when the city's demographic is very diverse and there might be different language access issues? And how do we communicate that in Mandarin, in Hindi, and other languages, that this is a city offered service that you may not know about? I'm sure that Leonard and his team is doing a great job on that, but I would love to study it and say, where are all the improvements on the study issue side, on the money side, on the communication side, and the actual outreach side to make that happen? I think that's what can make me the most effective council member that I could be, is to really be a voice for the community, an outlet from city staff, a mediator to the community.
John Cordes, C3 again. I brought it up first, so I hope I'm claiming credit for that, and I've been pushing this idea for a while. The challenge of doing it as far as a directed fund is that you normally have to have a nexus report that shows the impact of the development on trees, so it would be hard to figure out a way to justify more trees as a fee that we would charge like we do for our park improvement fee, our affordable housing fee, our traffic impact fee, right? It's hard to prove that there's some impact of trees on development. But I think as a general budget issue, I'm 100% in favor of increasing the funding, and I brought it up. And I was, again, first to mention that we should increase the employee headcount tax as a funding source for that. It seems straightforward and simple to me as a way to do that. I'm also in favor of all the other ideas you've heard up here. Anything that's going to get us to accelerate the rate that we're going to do new trees is good for the environment, it's good for global warming, and it's going to be good for residents, right? Leonard talked about the health impacts. Everybody loves being on tree-covered streets. So anything we can do to make that happen quicker, I'm in favor of. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think it's on now. Good, okay, yes. So Gustav Larsson. I agree with what John said about some of the challenges of adding another development fee. And actually, Sunnyvale has been a leader in adding development fees, especially our affordable housing fees. Our park mitigation fee is already at the legal maximum. So we've pushed those already pretty far. And I think for the dollar amount that we're talking about, the challenge is not going to be raising fees to collect it. And as the mayor said, we can find a way to fit it in the budget. I think the challenge is really communication and outreach and encouraging people to actually plant the trees, because 80% of the trees that we have in Sunnyvale are actually on private property. So we would have to get private property owners to be willing and interested and actually think about planting a tree. Now maybe no one has gone to talk to them, and maybe it wouldn't be that hard, especially if we have some support systems in place to make it a lot easier for people. But until we actually get the property owner saying, yes, I want a tree, we can't just go onto their property and plant a tree. So I think that's an absolutely critical part of this program.
It's good that you say that, Gustav, because our next project at SUFA, and we've tried this in a neighborhood, we tried it in the Ponderosa neighborhood, to go out and talk to the neighborhood association, and we wanted to get 10 neighbors together in maybe 1 or 2 streets who would plant a tree in their yard, private tree, and SUFA would donate $50 per tree. So if anyone wants to support us on that program, we'd be happy, but that was what we wanted to do, and get the neighborhoods rolling in planting trees also.
Do you want to tell people about the annual program that is that they go out and you guys plant trees?
Yes, well, Arbor Day, and Mr. Hendricks has been there too. We go out on Arbor Day, that's always March 7th in California, and then we make a week of it. And we've been going out for the last 4 years on Arbor Day and the week after, planting trees at schools, and the last 2 years, and in neighborhoods. And the last 2 years we've been concentrating on the San Miguel neighborhood, and we planted in 2017 about 30 trees there in the neighborhood. They were street trees. And in 2018 we planted about 30 trees. And I don't know, Leonard, is that on for 2019 also? San Miguel neighborhood?